So my name is Dwight Welch. I'm the pastor at the United Church of Norman, UCC. That's a part-time gig. The other gig that I do is I teach world religion and philosophy at OCCC. So I was just mentioning my classroom's like right a kitty corner from here. And as a side note, I had a student, and I'm so bad about losing things. I had a student come up to me who was looking for a faculty advisor for the atheist group on campus. So if anybody knows who to contact with the atheist group at OCCC, let me know, because I don't know if I have his card. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll let you know who to.
Okay, because they were asking for an advisor. Last time I tried, they had limits on how much they count. Hours essentially because they don't want to provide health insurance at OCCC.
Hours for signing up.
Yes.
So if you go over a certain amount, they'll have to provide you with health.
Yeah. So I got to get permission from the dean on whether I can do that. But I'd love to do that, very much so. And so when I was in the discussion online, they said, okay, well, we need somebody from Americans United to go and come and speak. Like, well, what is the topic? And they said, well, why don't we speak about the importance of connecting with religious voters? I was like, okay, let's get Dwight to do that. So does that sound like something you were expecting, or was that close?
Is that your idea?
I'll make sure that was on the.
Right now, my thinking on this is in the political environment that we're in, and with the guy that we have at all levels right now. Because I mean, with the president making the Supreme Court picks that we know that there are going to be cases that are going to come up to try and step across that separation of church and state.
Yeah.
And so it's important, I think, for us all to learn about Americans United and get involved.
Well, I appreciate it. And I don't have any information except for that we do have a Facebook page. So if you like the Facebook page, I don't know if I'm a member of, is there like an Atheists of Oklahoma group? Facebook group? Because
there is, but we're very exclusive.
Very exclusive? Okay, because I was going to say, I'd be willing to post on there, but at least the Facebook group for Americans United. So, and some of the efforts that's been going on. In particular, I think some of the conversation might have developed because of question 790, which was the get rid of the Ten Commandments, get rid of the separation of church and state altogether. And more importantly, get rid of public finance. Getting rid of the ban on public financing of religious groups, institutions. The biggest danger, of course, would have been the opening the floodgates to private schools, private religious schools. So Oklahoma has a much stronger separation of church and state than the First Amendment. And we should be proud of that. I think it's worthy of defense. And even though certainly we worked on that as an issue and lobbied on it and try to connect with folks. A lot of the organizing efforts kind of came about through Mitch Randall, who's the pastor at North Haven Baptist Church. And it was nice because he could highlight, now admittedly I'll tell you about Mitch Randall at North Haven Baptist. They're a member of the Cooperative Baptist Association, which is to say they're the Jimmy Carter Baptists. Like they're the Baptists who got upset because the fundamentalists took over in the early 80s. And I know a lot of those Baptists in Oklahoma. But you could tell if they're affiliated with the Cooperative Baptists, that's a sign that that's the group you're dealing with. Doesn't mean they're entirely progressive on all the issues, but you'll likely have an ally. And of course, Mitch Randall was able to kind of go and say, well, in the Baptist tradition, we used to favor separation of church and state, right? The Baptists were the ones who were being persecuted, ironically, by my denomination, because I'm actually United Church of Christ, which the predecessor denomination was Congregationalists, i.e., the Puritans. And the Puritans were the ones who drove out, John Williams and others, forced them off to Rhode Island. And so
It's come a long way.
It's come a long way, exactly. And now it's like we're for separation of church and state, and too many Baptists have totally forgotten that, really oppose it actually. So Mitch Randall is a really important voice. So that was some of the conversation going, wow, that was really great to get some clergy voices on that. The other kind of moment that happened was talking to, okay, who is the representative? She's a state senator from Kay Floyd, from Oklahoma City. And they had some bill to get rid of marriage altogether. but only clergy could write marriage certificates as a result. The state wouldn't do marriage certificates, so it would like require you to go to the church. And we had several clergy group go up there, and Kay Floyd was like, "I'm so grateful that this sounds bad. Like, I'm so grateful that clergy came up. If gay and lesbians would have come up, I didn't say, oh, by the way, I'm gay. But if gay and lesbians had come up and said, don't do this, you're hurting us, the legislators would have said, well, that's the point. We're trying to hurt you. So, that doesn't really compelling anything. He goes, there's two groups that the state legislature listens to, which is the church and business leaders. And that's about, and so... And not always, but nonetheless, so she was like expressed gratitude that there were clergy groups that were connecting on that. And then the other group that was, it really started because there's this woman, Shannon Fidel. She's a Disciples of Christ pastor in Enid, Oklahoma. And she was trying to get organized clergy for pro-choice, reproductive health issues, birth control, abortion. So she started this group called, which is online, the Progressive Clergy Action Network. And there must be like about 100, 120, so mainly clergy, religious leaders, Sunday school teachers, some rabbis and imams that are on there. And that a lot of them are located in Tulsa because in Tulsa they're really organized with the Tulsa Interfaith Alliance. I've seen the Oklahoma City Interfaith Alliance, but it's not so organized. But that's a hope. But in Tulsa they are. To call legislators on a couple of issues which are getting, headlined, like the predatory practices of the payday loan industry, and what the kind of interest that they charge for low-income folks, death penalty, the 790 and 791. Did I get that wrong? 789, 790.
780 and 781. If you're talking about
yes, thank you. Yes.
Drug reform.
The drug reform. That was a lot of churches that got connected on that, which makes sense. Like, well, should religion be that force which just tries to get everybody in jail? When your founder ended up getting getting politically in trouble, but nonetheless, so there were some good. So some of that kind of conversation happened. And realizing that anything, going forward is going to involve trying to build these alliances. So what I thought I'd do is propose at least 2 or 3 ideas based on that. And I do this as a pastor. Americans United has always had a blend. They have, God, what's his name? The Barry, Reverend Barry.
Barry Lynn.
Barry Lynn, thank you. He's a United Church of Christ pastor, right? He's the head of, the president of Americans United. So it's always been that group in particular has been an eclectic mix of atheists, agnostics, religious folks, just anybody who really cares about the First Amendment and cares about the separation of church and state in particular. So they've almost had that history naturally of kind of drawing that together. So what I thought I'd do is a proposal, but really more of a discussion, to throw out, because my presumption is I'll throw out some ideas and then everything opens up for discussion. If you're doing alliances with religious folks, I'd almost put a dividing line between 2 groups of religious folks. And how you relate to them will be different as a result. I'm going to try it right on this board, and hopefully we'll see this should work. I don't know how to classify this, but there is a whole group of clergy. Well, one of the issues that folks tend to get nervous about when trying to work with religious folks is I have to shut up about my beliefs, my values, and what I actually think, including about the status of religious claims, right? Okay. Sometimes, but not always. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, this isn't accurate, but let's go ahead and do that. Okay.
Some broad brushes, aren't we?
We are. Very as broad as you can. This is very broad, right? There's a whole group, and it's just more as a kind of, not to try to pigeonhole folks, but it's more just kind of getting a broad kind of framework. There are folks You all know UUs. UCC often. Quaker. Half the Quakers I know, by the way, are atheists. Not because I just determined they were by what they said, but because I asked them and they would say, I'm an atheist. So I'm going to put most Jewish synagogues. They're really, especially in Oklahoma, there really aren't any Orthodox. They're going to be Reform or conservative. But what conservative Judaism means, conservatism in Judaism is not an theology, or it's about how much tradition do you practice. So you could be just as liberal as conservative. Rabbi, for instance. You could be a liberal who believes in social justice and the First Amendment, separation of church and states, and abortion rights and LGBT rights and the results of modern science and all of that, but you are classified as a conservative rabbi because that means you are more attentive to keeping kosher laws than somebody who's Reformed. So, yeah, and since conservative and Reform make up 80% of Jews outside of the non-affiliated, which are primarily, again, agnostic and atheist, or eclectic, mix, I know a rabbi who does Buddhist meditation. This is not an unusual combination, I'm painting with a broad brush, but since I'm UCC. For the most part, you don't have to give up a doggone thing to work with these folks. And I just wanted to give you that as a category. In other words, if you want to say, wow, isn't this superstitious bunk? The clergy person's probably going, yeah, it is. Whatever it is, you're not going to go, well, we better not talk about abortion because this is a religious person, and if they're a religious person, they won't want to hear it. They will want to hear it. They will want to, because they will share most likely the same thoughts you do. And in fact, you could find ways of coordinating on abortion rights, for instance. That might be harder over here, right? The only reason I mention this is because the media tends to go, if it's a religious voice, and how do Democrats reach out to religious voices? They have to be more quiet. Don't talk about transgender issues, right? That upsets middle America and the religious voters. That's how the media portrays it. And that's not true. It upsets folks on this end. In no way upsets. These folks are all on the front line. So we're bringing in Lori Walkie to speak at our church. And she's the UCC Associate Minister at Mayflower Congregational. And she was one who did the invocation at the Women's March, which I posted on her page. And so here, I'm just, if you're talking to you, if you're talking to you again, you may be talking to an atheist, including if you're talking to the pastor. And not a secret atheist, but a public atheist, right? Someone who said, yes, they might use the word humanist. If you're UCC, you're not going to have folks who identify with atheism, but when you try to pick apart the religious ideas, what you discover in all the occasions is that whatever religious terms or words are being used, they're always in reference to this world and the natural world. It's never really in reference to the supernatural. I actually claim the word naturalist, and I remember there's a naturalism group in Norman, and I said, you're a naturalist? Yeah. But you're a pastor. Yes. I'm not sure yet what my status is with that. But the point is, if they're talking about, Quaker might use the phrase, I'm holding you in the light. That's a good Quaker phrase. Does that mean there's a supernatural deity who's going to come in, fix everything? Magically grow back arms? No, it doesn't work that way, right? But holding you in the light, holding you in comfort, holding you in whatever divine presence works in such a way as to bring you comfort and relief and support. But not violations of natural law, not violations of how we understand the world works, So I mentioned this so that if you're talking to these folks, not only don't have to hold back on abortion, gay rights, certainly the First Amendment, certainly Donald Trump, right? You have an automatic ally. But then if you want to go, isn't kind of prayer kind of hokey? And then the minister goes, well, many forms are, I prefer meditation, right? I want to center myself, and that's the spiritual practice that I engage in. So even then, even if you feel like, okay, let's bring in the conversations that you might have, I'm speculating, in atheist circles, so, well, could I bring this up? Would I be offensive to this person if I did? No, not at all. The big difference, I'm not saying there's no difference, but the big difference is, do you think religious traditions is there anything to be excavated out of it that can separate it out from all that, the fundamentalism and all that? Is there something worthwhile of using Christian terms, Jewish terms, Buddhist terms? Or are they inexorably tied up with something that's pretty oppressive? Obviously, these are folks who share the same values, and they are more optimistic, or hope, or believe that somehow, yes, you can bring out the liberatory elements of a religion. Jesus as subversive, not as whatever this White House is. Judaism as a religion of folks who were enslaved and were able to throw off their oppressors. There's this trust and hope in that. Anyways, I raise this to go, you don't have to keep your guard up or down or whatever. You just have natural allies. They just automatically exist. So why not connect? Okay. I'm going to probably put the Cooperative Baptists here. I haven't tried that with Mitch Randall, bring all these up. I'm making these denominations up, but let's put Catholic. I could put Cooperative Baptists, Moderate, Southern Baptists.
Methodists, or are Methodists going to be a liberal group?
Methodists are going to be all over. There are Methodists here. I know some Methodist clergy who fit this. In fact, Mosaic United Methodists, Scott Spencer, right here, I think there's a lot of Methodists that are here. I guess First Methodist in Oklahoma City is really virulently anti-gay. And they actually were one of the big endorsers, along with First Baptist and more, that big anti-abortion, anti-gay rally they had at the state capitol last year. They're right over here. But, yeah. So Methodists, on the whole, most likely, your typical Methodist is going to be here. But yes, you could, it's kind of the same thing with disciples of Christ. I know clergy who are here who are disciples. I don't think I've ever really met anybody over here, but common here. Who else? Lutherans. I'm using Christian groups. What would be an example of a non-Christian group? Islam. Now, as just a side note on Islam, the political alliances have been developed to stop really bad things from happening, like from Donald Trump. But prior to Donald Trump, the Republican Party has largely declared war against Islam ever since 9/11. I'm not saying Bush did or every single politician, but we know Oklahoman Republicans who have made their whole political career based on bashing Islam. And one of the groups that have been out there in support of Muslims have been LGBT folks. So you'll be shocked to discover that almost half of all Muslims support marriage equality. And that's over 2-to-1 over American evangelicals. And I don't think it's a change in doctrine in Islam. I think they've had these successful alliances with LGBT and other progressive forces to defend their civil rights against the right wing. And if you work with somebody long enough, you might start thinking, hey, maybe they deserve equality. Yes?
When you're characterizing Islam, I assume that you mean around here?
American Islam, yeah. Not global, right? Yeah.
Because I couldn't actually name the mosque in Oklahoma City, but when I think of Islam, I think of these groups that are on the news. The ones on the news are not very moderate.
No.
But that's how they're on. The moderate groups don't get on the news. Oh, look, they're packing food for hungry people.
No, that's exactly. There's a guy, I might have met him, Imam in Chaucy. I have not sat down on LGBT issues. Clearly he believes in religious pluralism, because that's what he spends most of his time doing. He basically goes to Jewish, Christian, and college campuses giving talks or doing the Muslim-Christian dialogue, Jewish dialogue things. Though as a side note, I want to mention that I hear folks when they say, how come when there's religious dialogue, secular folks are never included? It's always, you have to have the three monotheisms. You don't even get Buddhism in there. And you're certainly not going to get an atheist on there. We're going to have an interfaith service for X. But let's not invite anybody who's secular. But anyways, but I appreciate what Inchausti's doing. He's like a one-person salesperson for Islam, or the moderate face of Islam to Oklahomans. Kind of a goodwill ambassador. In Islam, I think he'd be considered pretty liberal, but I've met him, but I haven't poked.
The imam that was at the Muslim that they.
No, it's not the same one. I think the one that you're thinking of, his name I would mangle. He's done the interfaith stuff before, like the bell ringing.
Yeah. So that would be, yeah. I mean, he's a great. Well, they've been, like I said, he was at the Women's March. He spoke at the Women's March. There was a no ban, no wall rally at the Oklahoma Capitol. They usually kind of bring him in, to be kind of represent the Muslim community publicly. He's involved with well, there's a couple of mosques, the primary mosque in Oklahoma City, the Islamic Society, I think. These are, I just mentioned these folks, as this is what usually people in their head think is how you relate to religious folks, which is you find some issues to work with them on, and then you decide there's certain issues you're just not going to probably fight about. This is closer to the kind of the stereotype. Like, I probably wouldn't open with the Catholic Church, and I haven't with Inchausti yet. Let's talk about LGBT issues. Where is it? Where are things at here? But certainly. Historically, these are denominations if you want to come forward on a specific set of issues. Most folks that I know, well, certainly in Islam, but many folks in this group are folks that are just as alarmed about Donald Trump and are just as alarmed by this huge, what's going on in the state of Oklahoma, are certainly alarmed by the kind of hatred that people are able to casually toss out against migrants and against immigrants and against religious minorities. And if you went to your Catholic priest and said, hey, we got this coalition against hate, I don't know, whatever hate group, you probably have an ally there. But yeah, so I mentioned that these are the kind of folks in my head that I probably want to go, hey, let's talk about whether prayer is bunk or not, Mr. Priest, I don't know, or even, of course, LGBT. I mean, I worked with the Oklahoma Council of Churches, and we had the Catholic Church as a part of it. And it was, I admit, frustrating because there was anti-gay attacks in the legislature, and because we had the Catholics on board, we couldn't talk about LGBT issues because the Catholic Church would get really upset if you tried to do that. And so we felt like, until finally they just walked out on us anyways. And it was kind of liberatory. It was like, okay, we can actually talk about the issues we want to talk about. But I don't want to give that. I mean, I think that my proposals, there's probably a lot of overlap. And certainly on the First Amendment. Certainly on the First Amendment. And it's, and to be quite honest, if you're involved in any progressive groups, you may already know some of the liberal members of these groups, such that you could actually just use them as who do I need to talk to? Who am I wasting my time with? And who's worth actually stopping by? And yeah.
I was just kind of, the Catholics you could say are moderate, but then at the same time, and they respect that church separation of church and state. Yet it's the Knights of Columbus that were responsible for inserting one nation, bifurcating the one nation indivisible with one nation under God indivisible.
Yeah.
So it's I don't think they're painting them all or saying that.
Well, they're not definitely.
It's definitely a broad brush.
There are liberal Catholics who are automatic allies. There are Catholics who are so right wing that Like, I remember talking to a young Catholic priest, like, you use birth control, you're not a Catholic. You might as well just sign your certificate for hell. You're gone. So this is, yeah, you're right, this is a broad brush. But like I said, my thinking with this is if you're in peace and justice groups, you may run into a liberal Catholic priest or layperson. You may run into a liberal disciple, and you might be able to go, or liberal progressive. There's a group called Methodists for Marriage Equality in Oklahoma. And, and say, hey, we're trying to get a coalition. Who's the people to talk to? And who's the people I don't have to waste my time with? And yeah, every group is going to be different. Like Catholics, it's like, well, you might be able to get, you might have to kind of imagine the issues. The moderate Southern Baptists have this keen eye on the separation of church and state. Like I said, Mitch Randall and actually First Baptist in Norman is a member of the Cooperative Baptist too. We all know, and he's a member of the Cooperative Baptist. Why am I going to forget his name? Bruce Prescott. Exactly, Bruce Prescott. He's over here, but he's Baptist. But he would be an example of like, Bruce, I need to talk to some Southern Baptist ministers. Help me out. Let me connect with who needs to be connected to. And like I said, you might, and also a lay of the land of the alliances might look different. So I can imagine First Amendment, immigrant rights, certainly most folks here don't like the hate language that's going on, I mean, when you're seeing mosques being attacked, that kind of thing, it's, and if somebody even says something, I think these are groups that even when folks say something hateful against atheists, like our new Attorney General, when asked if atheists could be moral or...
Yeah, it was actually, can they think?
Can they think more? Yeah. And he goes, well, I'm not so sure about that. And you're like, okay. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is the group could say, well, that doesn't make sense, right? You can't malign X. Then you have conservatives. Everybody else. I will say, I don't know who they are, but I've seen it in other states. There could be a mega church under this corner. I don't know if there is. I know they've existed in other places. Most won't. And some are very, very, very right-wing. But there's a few, I don't know who they are in Oklahoma. If you do, let me know. But I've seen them, you see it every once in a while in an article, like a mega church that decided, hey, let's welcome refugees, and like 1/3 of the church leaves. There was a mega church that said, why don't we welcome gay people in Seattle? And his denomination kicked him out. But then the disciples actually said, we'll bring you in, So I mean, I don't know again how to find those folks. I don't know who they are yet. But whenever you see that, there's so many churches in Oklahoma that are that, and they don't have a clear denominational whatever, journey, I don't know, life, I don't know all the groups. Wildwood Church, whatever conservative groups. Well, you all know who they are. I'm trying to think of the list.
Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist, Church of Christ, Nazarene, Pentecostal.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here probably I put put an AA church, African American church, under here. Again, could be pretty socially conservative, but they've been brought out a lot by what's been happening under Trump. So, and there are some churches that are actually kind of moderate, even on other issues, so that would be an important ally. Yeah.
How would you characterize what I see around my house are large evangelical churches? How would you? Are they pretty much conservative?
Yeah, they are. I'll just call them mega churches. And like I said, they have a praise band. They have a nondescript name that sounds like a suburb. Wildwood. Living Oak. I don't know. Worship Center, Life Center, right? Sometimes if you look on their website long enough, you'll find the denominational affiliation. Because sometimes Southern Baptists Southern Baptists know that people don't like Southern Baptists. So they don't like denominations anyways. So they don't call themselves First Baptist. They call themselves
So they're repackaging
Henderson
themselves.
Hills.
Henderson Hills Christian Center. That's exactly, yeah. Repackaging.
They've definitely taken on a mega church vibe over the last 10 to 20 years. They've been headed that way.
Yeah, it's like if you don't see Baptists anywhere on the front page of the website, that's a good sign. They're hiding it. They're hiding it. I'd say the vast majority are here. My hope is there's one or two moderate pastors hanging out, and we don't know who they are.
So can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
On that? So like this upcoming weekend, for instance, Frontline, Christ Community Church, Faithworks, Western Oaks, the Nazarenes, St. James Episcopal, etc.
Oh.
are having a march for immigrants that, to me, and I've been having
Yeah.
a Facebook fight with them regarding this, seems to be just another faux pas Christian pat on the back. Am I misreading that in a way?
I don't think I saw that. Are we Facebook friends?
Yes.
Okay, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I don't think, I think it's real, but I think they're being oblivious. They're doing, if I'm supposed to be giving advice for a secular group on how to relate to the religious need to have advice on how to relate to a much broader audience, right? Like, yeah, we just, no, I think the way it's designed it's not going to be inclusive.
So you honestly believe that their ambitions are in the right place?
Yes, I think it's real.
They're just being naive.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's kind of like, well, it's like the speaker goes, well, at least, in America, we need to cut across the divisions that divide us as a country. At least we all believe in one God, that brings us all together. And you're like, well, I appreciate it, but no, that's not, that's not helpful, I think that's what's, yeah.
Just didn't know enough about Frontline or churches like that. As far as
I don't know Frontline. I've seen them. When you mentioned Episcopal, I mean, I looked at their website and it seemed legit. And there was a lot of, I think there were some Catholic groups, weren't there?
There's a Catholic group. There's also one Hispanic church.
And there's one Hispanic church. So I think it's real. But yeah, this happens. I had a friend who organized religious congregations, get UUs and Jews and the African American church and white mega churches somehow together. And that was always a problem. The problem was the bigger Christian churches had no concept of like a religious other whatsoever. And you're like, this is not helping our coalition because we've got a synagogue here. So if you're doing every single prayer in the name of Jesus, consider your Jewish neighbor just for a moment. And so yeah, I think the critique is real. What they're doing is real, and they're just oblivious. And I don't know how you always hope at least there's somebody here where you might have a conversation. Like I think it's always helpful when I've seen atheists who have the communities do interfaith dialogues. And they do like interfaith. We had an interfaith prayer breakfast in Norman. And we had every group except for anybody who wasn't a part of a formal religion, And the vast majority of them were Christian. And though they always brought in, Imam and Chauncey was there from Oklahoma City, and he gave a Muslim, they had, somebody from teaches Jewish studies at OU. But it still had that feel of like, you haven't really expanded the community yet, in a way that at least did happen with Martin Luther King, who did have, atheists and secular folks who worked with him closely. It's like, so it feels weird to like kind of exclude in that way. So I don't know, with conservative groups, I don't know if I have anything to say about that, except I will say that there's this, maybe I make a division between the there are alliances with small conservative groups. In Oklahoma, that might mean LDS, Jehovah's Witness, United Pentecostal. I know this seems really weird, but because they're Seventh-day Adventist, because they're not really accepted by their wider evangelical church, they're seen as weird and quirky, and they do have their own beliefs. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses were the first folks to make it to the Supreme Court, like challenging the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Because they take seriously what Jesus says, don't swear. I mean, not profanity. I mean, don't swear on an oath, right? Let your yes be yes and your no, no, and that should be sufficient. And so the Jehovah's Witnesses will not say pledges. They also won't serve in the military. I mean, makes sense, right? Sometimes, like, I became friends with this United Pentecostal minister who was convinced I was going to hell. But just because I kind of treated him with respect, that was more than the Southern Baptists offered him. We'd have, like, lunch every week, keep each other on track. LDS, a lot of, we know what happened when Romney ran. And all of a sudden, some more evangelicals voted for Donald Trump than Mitt Romney, right? I mean, Mitt Romney should have been the poster child for American evangelicalism, but he's Mormon.
Right.
And Mormons, and when I was a kid growing up, I read all these books, but Mormons were this scary cult that, And so every once, I even put some Mormons over here, as in, they're kind of in the losing end, especially if they're in the minority, like in Oklahoma. It feels like there's possibilities to say, hey, when that's the case, we laugh and joke about the stuff we disagree with. Yeah, I still think you're going to hell. We get that, I won't drink coffee in front of you. Sorry, Mormon. But you have at least one or two things that connect. Here you might have shared values, and here it's like you're all on the same page. So there's really literally no keep your guard up. Here you might be a bit diplomatic and go, okay, let's talk about the stuff that actually brings us together and not everything I happen to think, right? And this is, what's the one issue? Yeah. One issue, if there's any. I mean, here, the closest thing I could say is that they were from conservatives who are freaked out by the idea of getting rid of marriage licenses altogether and being legally liable and responsible for this, for this kind of thing, right? This is like a burden being imposed on the church. That's not a big alliance. I don't know. But anyways, this is really the reason I came to say is that there's a lot of allies. I mean, I was in Lawton. We were tabling. I saw Brenda Weber there with the Lawton Secular Group. And I was tabling with OCRJ, Oklahoma Coalition for Reproductive Justice. I ran into several clergy who were here. And they felt so good to see that there were actually liberals in Lawton, Oklahoma. It was just like, yes, it was like a breath of fresh air. So, like, these kind of alliances, like, they exist around Oklahoma, even in, like, small towns. Like, and I know the nice thing about the clergy network is I know where some of them are in the small towns. In most places, I put Episcopal here. Everybody knows John Shelby Spahn? Yeah. Okay, he's here, right? Episcopal. In Oklahoma, I haven't seen them be that progressive. I don't know why. If you're in other parts of the country, they are, but here, I put them here. Yeah, I don't know. That weirds me out, because I'm like, John Shelby Spahn? Why are you being, the bishop wasn't really keen on, in Oklahoma, on LGBT issues. Does that sound helpful, accurate? Totally messed up?
I mean, from what I've noticed around here, there's you, Cherie, Kayla, Neil, pastors like that are really easy to talk to about activism, First Amendment rights, things like that. It's just because you all are the most vocal.
Yeah.
Outside of that, then I see a second tier of Mosaic Methodist, UU churches, things like that, and then I see the moderate, the big conservative, small conservative, and then like Windsor Hills somewhere late.
I discovered we had it.
Is like,
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder, and I don't know, because I've never worked with them on activism issues. Like, is the Hindu temple a place to talk to? I've never talked to them, I send my students there, put it to the right papers, Are the Buddhist groups? I don't know. Again, the same thing where who do I see in the circles? I tend to see these folks.
A lot of Buddhists would probably be on the liberal because there's some of those that are atheists and
Yeah. They should be. It's just when I was in Southern Illinois, like the Buddhist group there was like politically highly engaged, and I haven't run into it as much here, partly because there's, I can't pronounce it, Sokigai, which is actually kind of conservative form of Buddhism from Japan. There are a lot of times these are immigrant communities, and immigrant communities don't tend to be left or right. They tend to service their own membership, so they're not tend to be activists. Not really enemies, but you're not going to see them necessarily. So actually, maybe I'll just put immigrant. You know, like I know one of the, I think there's a Vietnamese Buddhist center. Buddha Mind, I think, is Chinese. That's historically what's happened with immigrant churches in general. You know, so the Spanish churches, you're likely to see that too. Southeast Asian, not the bad guys that are going to be holding the anti-gay stuff, but they may not be at the Women's March either.
Right.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, if we have progressive issues to work on, we're more likely to have more overlap with your typical liberal denominations. What specific issues would you say we need to be working on right now? And maybe not like down to the level of, SB 390 just got passed the committee, not that level of specificity. But,
Yeah.
but generally, like, what issues should we be working with? If we could reach out to the UCCs or the UUs or the Quakers to work on stuff, what do you think we need to be focusing on in 2017?
Yeah, I have an idea for both categories, actually. I don't know if this is the case, but I think it's the case. I think because I was going to say everything, but like when I thought people are like, what did you protest at the Women's March? And I was like, well, everything. But it was because you had to protest everything. I honestly think, if I had a dream, I'd be like, I think that these are the kind of groups that it'd be nice to do stuff together, whatever that means. Have a joint meeting together, do a presentation, see if you can get a speaker that might both enjoy. I mean, this is almost like 2017, hang out with these folks, right, essentially, and find out who they are, like, so if you find somebody who's really, like Lori Walker gives this barnstorming speech at the Women's March, see if you can't get her, or vice versa, say, we do a presentation at Mayflower, congregational, can the Atheists of Oklahoma do that? And maybe,
We've got nothing but despair to offer.
At this point, at this point, I think most progressives are in that boat, right? Like, is it going to get better? Yeah, I mean, I honestly, that's almost where I would be tempted. Like right now, of course, we didn't have the money, we're a small church, but there's a newspaper ad being done, Congregations Against Hate. But see, a lot of times, again, it's always like churches connecting to other churches. And I would love it if it was civic groups, nonprofits, different kind of philosophies represented. But the ad was supposed to be saying, we don't go for this anti-gay, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, whatever the discourse is happening, we, as our religious communities, want to do X. And there's a woman in Oklahoma City, Fared Harris, who I think is the rabbi at Temple Benite, Israel. And she seems to be organizing a lot of this. But like Lori Walkey's done a lot. They brought in the Muslim group to Mayflower, and then they had a joint thing together, program. I'm just saying, there's certainly going to be some issues. We have a bunch of anti-gay bills in the legislature. They just passed out of committee a bill that basically gives carte blanche to discriminate on, you don't even really need a religious reason. You can have a philosophic reason, so there you go. Philosophic reason, and if you disapprove of anybody's lifestyle. And they said, well, that means that you could actually turn it around and you could say, I disagree with the evangelical lifestyle. And the author was like, yep, see, I'm for open freedom for all sides. I want everybody to be able to discriminate against everybody. He didn't say the discriminate word, but that was, that is, I mean, and you'll see some of that stuff because you're all connected to the groups that are kind of following the legislature. But if I had a dream of 2017, 2018, it would be get to know these folks and do stuff together. And invite the pastors over to the Naturalist meeting. Like I got David Wheelock invited me. Like, you need to come. I gotta do it.
Well, no, I can't get an invitation to your class, so come on.
Oh no. Oh well, you know that never worked. But let's talk again. I know I didn't. I dropped the ball on that. But that's fine. This time it's like it's organized differently. So I still teach at Atheism Agnosticism. So we'll talk. Because I never. Because now it's like 3 days a week. No. But seriously, maybe that's an example though. I mean, literally just calling up and say, hey, how are you? You know, maybe it's like literally taking out a pastor like Scott, not Scott Walker, but you know the guy at Mosaic. And I haven't done this yet. You're like, we'll go out to coffee just to get to know you, you know, and to shoot the breeze and to see if there's any possibilities of X, you know. I mean, an easy call to make is with the Unitarians, right? You know, I mean, we want to split a pride table. You don't no reason to split a pride table, but I'm just saying, you call. Can we share? We can have a table right by each other. We'll go up together. Maybe you all pay for your own table, but you'll be right next to it, door to us. You know. Then we have to.
What is Mayflower? What denomination are they?
Oh, UCC. Okay. Yeah. Actually, the church I serve in Norman was planted by Mayflower. Yeah, it was like a 10-year-old church, but it was just like all these folks are coming up to Norman to go to church in Oklahoma City, and it was like, why not have church in Norman? So that would be my temptation. And also because then these folks will give you the names for these folks, so that when you do have the big legislative battle, you'll be able to go, okay, Scott Spencer, that's the name at Mosaic. Or okay, Lori Walkie, who do I need to talk to? Because we got to get some folks together on whatever.
What was it, Mennonite?
Oh my goodness, Peace Mennonite. Not Peace Mennonite, why did I think of Joy? I know the folks over there. Yeah, I put them there. They're good folks to do good work with. And
Family is Mennonite. My mom's family.
Yeah.
Comes from Mennonite roots, and they run the whole gamut. There's like super.
Oh yeah.
Or like the ones that the bonnets and stuff.
Yes.
And then there's the ones that are like pacifist liberals, and then there's the ones that are both in bonnets and pacifist liberals.
Yeah, these are
Fascinating.
This is a broad spectrum. That's true. There are Mennonites here and here and here.
You could almost find because there's so many different flavors of all of the denominations, you could probably find any one of them in any group that has.
Except for maybe the there was a right-wing Quaker group. My husband was, when he came out of the closet, he was like, I better look up a religious group. I need to find an LGBT religious group. He went to a Quaker church that was programmed. If it's unprogrammed, they're mainly atheists and agnostics and spiritual liberals who just want to hang out. Hey, they're great. They're the ones who meditate. But there are actually Quaker churches that actually have hymns and pews and ministers and the whole thing. Yeah. And they're almost always conservative. Has anyone heard of Philip Gulley? He wrote a little book on, he's written tons of little kind of popular liberal religious books. But he wrote a book that kind of was like universalistic. You know, could be the divine in every religion. And he got a heresy trial over it. Basically, yeah. Because he was in a conservative program church. They tend to be in Indiana. But my partner walked into a Quaker church in Virginia, and they were like, they might as well have been Southern Baptists. Wow. And it was like, no, I'm not going to do. Which is weird, because, yeah, but the unprogrammed. Joy Mennonite is definitely like, I know both the pastor and the associate minister, but I'm friends with the associate minister. And him and I are, again, he's somebody who's like, look, theologically, there isn't a huge difference between you guys and them. And it's I haven't talked to the senior minister enough, but they definitely have radical political commitments. I remember the Brethren had this issue of the big separation, and there was a LGBT Brethren congregation. They couldn't do same-sex weddings in the Brethren church, but they had a blessing for friendship. So they had friendship blessings. That just happened to be, because you should be friends with your partner, you know? Yeah. So Joy Mennonite's a great congregation, and they were at Pride. That's always a good way. That's a great way to find out these churches, right? Who's at Pride? I saw First Unitarian. I saw St. Stephen's United Methodist from in Norman, right, was there. Mosaic was there. Mayflower, Church of the Open Arms. That's another church. Caleb Bonewell, who's also
both.
yes.
What denomination are they?
UCC.
Okay.
Yeah. So my recommendation is become friends with them and get to know them, and vice versa. And because the challenge is both sides, right? So it's like, oh, I learn about you, and I can appreciate these liberal religious communities and the way they can be an ally. The reverse should be the case. Churches should be like, wow, there's this great group of atheists, and we can do things together and learn from each other, and somehow be spiritually informed in the kind of things we can do together. Whereas this looks much more like traditional coalition work in the old boring way, but no less important. And there's a lot more of these. The reason why this is a great community is that we're so small, we all know each other. Especially in Oklahoma, we know each other. It's like there were like 3 clergy in Norman that could do same-sex weddings. And I was like one of 3. Yeah. Except for the Universal Life Church. Everybody know Universal Life?
Yeah, I'm one of those.
Yes.
I've done same-sex weddings.
Yes. I actually had a Universal Life minister do my wedding. Yeah. And when I was in, I know, seriously.
Takes all kinds.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like this is the biggest in Oklahoma. 40% of Oklahomans identify as evangelical. So it's one of the biggest. Tennessee is the only state that beats us. But the second biggest group were nuns. N-O-N-E-S, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't completely mean atheist or non-believers either.
No, it doesn't. Right? You can be
A lot of the SBNRs that are classify themselves as nuns but still hold to a
What's an SBNR?
spiritual but not religious.
yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and that could mean. Well, it was kind of funny. I had this conversation with somebody at OU. We had we're working with a couple like the UUs and a couple other groups to do a student thing on campus, and we just provide free lunches. And I ran into this staff member who she works at OU, and she was just telling me, well, I go over to Morning Star, which is like a New Age church. There are some New Age churches. I don't see them politically here, but they should share the same values. But every time we try to bring them out of the woodwork, they don't come. Like Unity, like this in Norman, the Morning Star Center for Living, So I almost tempted to put New Age here, which sounds really weird. It doesn't seem right to me, but you can't get them out to do the justice kind of stuff. If I looked at around the room, we have an LGBT coalition in Norman, and it's the UU, the UCC, the Quaker, Hillel in Norman, Memorial Presbyterian. Though most Presbyterians I put here, but there are a few that are over here, and that's who I saw around the table.
I've seen a Mosaic church pop up in our area.
That may not be. No, because the Mosaic United Methodist meets at the University, what's it called? Oklahoma City University? Yeah, OCU.
Okay, this is like one of those newer.
Then it's probably, it's over there.
Pastor, he has a very short history.
Oh, yeah. So this is hang out, become friends, know each other, and then this is your standard coalition work. These are the folks you protect yourself against.
So I think you're bringing it up earlier with certain cooperative Baptists, but is that the difference between a fundamentalist and an evangelical? Because I know there's been some division there, or at least there used to be division there. Whereas fundamentalists would be not trying to directly influence politics, while evangelicals will. And this could have, I just saw some interview today talking about it, so that's all I know. But is that, do you know of that division, or do you know of, I guess, a fundamentalist versus the Christian right?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, fundamentalism historically was, since the Scopes monkey trial, has been the sign of a group that isolates themselves from other Christians even. You know, they have the one true understanding, so they were called separatists. Whereas evangelicals were busy making parachurch ministries and, you know, like Campus Crusade and InterVarsity. You could bring all the Christians in together kind of thing. So that tended to be, evangelicals were very keen on working with other evangelicals, whereas fundamentalists were not. Like the Independent Baptists would be your classic. Anybody been to an Independent Baptist church? Oh, okay. Did you see brochures against Billy Graham in the church? Because Billy Graham would share a stage with Catholics even. I'm like, they're not even Christian, right? you know, and you're like, really, Billy Graham? You don't like Billy Graham? Yes. Well, they don't, or they use the New Perversion version, NIV, not the King 1611 King James. No, I would say the Cooperative Baptist division is more about the Southern Baptist. When people use the word fundamentalist, like in the Southern Baptist Convention, they basically mean religious right. Okay. They mean creationists. They mean men only, not women, in terms of leadership. Certainly rejecting historical critical scholarship of the Bible. So when the fundamentalists took over, I guess I would put them as, again, they're moderates who are like, I guess they'd call them, I think Cooperative Baptists would say, oh, I'm an evangelical because I believe in Jesus. And I believe Jesus has this call in my heart. But no, I don't believe the earth is 6,000 years old. You know? And I certainly don't want to go to the legislature and try to, you know. And I recognize that the authorship of the Bible has a checkered history, right? You know? Whereas the Southern Baptists, the folks who took over, who literally fired almost the entire faculty of many seminaries, just kicked them out because they had women professors, you know, people who taught these kind of historical critical understanding of the Bible. They were all kicked out. But there, when they mean fundamentalists, they just mean religious right. Because Southern Baptists are anything but isolationist. But like you can usually tell, inerrancy is the thing that was the battle. Can you admit of any mistake? You know, so inerrancy is almost like.
In other words, they're saying the Bible's perfect. There's no mistakes. It's absolutely the Word of God. And there's no flaws with it. It's perfect.
No contradictions. No errors. Yeah. Lack of error. That was the battle line. I was going to say, Missouri Synod Lutherans tend to be here, but they're not very political. That's why this threefold division is kind of weird, right? Because it's like Missouri Synod is conservative. I've never met one that wasn't. And yet they don't tend to be, let's go take over the legislature and spread, you know. They're more like the immigrant church. They're like, we're just going to do our Lutheran worship and potlucks. It's all good. And we have our beliefs. They just happen to be very conservative. And you can't have communion because you're not Missouri Synod. So this is semi-helpful, semi-not.
I mean, I didn't know a lot of those, or at least the ones that are in Oklahoma.
Yeah. And this one category isn't usually known in Oklahoma in particular, you know, because we never get, numbers are small. If the Oklahoma press goes to media, like, let's bring in a Christian voice. And you don't hear the word Christian anything. We're gonna listen to a Christian artist while we go read our Christian books, and we want to hear a Christian politician. You know, it's this.
Yeah.
Whenever they do a story about us, which they do like every 2 years, they always sandwich it with some preacher at the beginning and the end.
Yes.
And if I remember my clips correctly, they're almost all from that last column.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, like have to have it. They did this, like, it's apparently NPR, this 16-year-old transgender girl, you know, talking about her experiences about the school system, and it was all about the bathroom, right? And then they literally brought in, let's bring in a fundamentalist minister to debate this 16-year-old kid. Jeez. NPR, right? Like, well, you have to bring in all sides. No, you could have just, like, at least you don't spring this on a kid, right? You know, and have a fundamentalist pastor at the end.
We talked about that a little bit in the filter bubbles. We talked about this whole idea we have to have fair and balanced, and like sometimes no, there's not another side of it, like the global, like climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, like okay, you don't have to bring somebody in who's an idiot who shilling for the oil companies
No.
to debate this because they're in the minority and they're
And they're wrong, and so then you're like,
Already in the in the legislator's office, writing the legislation.
Or like historical context at all.
and I will say Americans United has tended to rely on this, and the advice that I'm given for you guys is essentially the same as I'm given for ourselves, which is to develop this right over here, essentially. But I would love to see more of this. Like I said, Bruce Prescott was a huge key part of that. I have to tell you a quick story about this, where I have a love of this. This is self-promotion, but Bruce Prescott, when they had the Ten Commandments issue, right? And his name would always show up in the paper about the Ten Commandments. But they say he's a Baptist minister, and he is. But he's retired. He doesn't serve a church. But he has spoken at our church many times. And we have videos of him. And we've posted it on our website where he's given talks. So if you Google Bruce Prescott, you get our name. And people always go, well, if you're a gay-friendly church, you must get a lot of hate mail. Never got hate mail over being gay-friendly. Never once. I'll tell you how we got hate mail. Separation of church and state. That'll get you the hate mail. We got so much. You want to tear down the Ten Commandments? Like, yes, I do. And I've run into that a couple of times. I mean, I had a UCC pastor friend who he had two parishioners who challenged the Ten Commandments in their county courthouse. It was a lesbian couple, actually. And this church had worked on LGBT issues. They never received hate mail. They challenged the huge Ten Commandments. You couldn't walk into the county courthouse, the only government office in the entire town. I mean, you can't imagine how much more religious endorsement you can get. You cannot go to get your tags without seeing this, right? So they challenged it successfully. They got it moved to like a city or a private park or something. And like death threats almost on that level to this little church.
What's crazy is that like the Ten Commandments usually ends up in a public, or like where ours is right now. It's at this think tank on Lincoln Boulevard.
Yeah.
Where it's pretty easy to see. You can drive right by it with, take out your camera, get a good picture of it. If you wanted to see the same monument before, you had to like find some place to park at the Capitol and then walk around to the north side, go up the steps to see it, because it was facing the building.
Wow.
So it is vastly more publicly accessible now than it was at the state capitol. So this isn't about like people seeing the Ten Commandments. This is about putting a religious imprimatur on the government.
It's a stamp, yeah.
Yes.
It's a stamp of an endorsement.
We own this. This is ours.
And there's a bill that does that, by the way. There's another Ten Commandments bill in our legislature. I can't remember the number.
Yeah, they're wanting to put it in schools now, or get authorization to put it in schools, which has been problematic and is going to probably end up in another legal challenge. And way to go, Oklahoma. We're broke and we want to spend more money on legal challenges that we don't need.
Well, and I'll give you, by the way, that just triggered something. Okay, so group here. Mitch Randall again has been key on this one, right? And I don't know the full story of how he pulled it together, but there's a group called Pastors for Public Education. And he pulled in a ton of African American and minority churches on board because they've noticed that the public school funding is going down the tubes. And that the legislature wastes a whole lot of money on all the culture war stuff instead of actually funding the school system and balancing the budget. And so these have not been, there are certainly some groups here, but it has been primarily groups where I probably wouldn't theologically always agree, but they can all see that schools are falling and that we need to fund it. And so they found that one issue. So schools might be, the state of education and teachers might be, if there was anything that could bring folks in Oklahoma together, I hope.
I just had a conversation with a Methodist preacher today, or part-time preacher, he works out at Tinker. And we were talking about the Johnson Amendment and about the idea that they're...
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I actually kind of side with you. I think that's actually a good thing. And I'm like, okay, cool.
John, it's amazing that I actually follow the religious right on Twittersphere, which I probably shouldn't, but... and they're all perplexed by the Johnson Amendment. Like, they're like, nobody wants the Johnson Amendment. Like, nobody cares about the Johnson Amendment. They're actually less likely... evangelicals are less likely to hear about politics than in liberal churches. because they've already got this kind of like shared consensus, you don't have to go and you can get 90% of folks in your church to vote Republican without ever mentioning the word Republican or vote for Mary Fallon or Trump, right? Because they just have this shared moral consensus, not moral, immoral consensus, whatever that consensus is, right? They've got it. They don't need to preach it. Like, they don't care about the Johnson Amendment. And there's enough reason for them to be afraid about the issue of especially taxation of churches to say that's not worth the trade-off. So I've heard a lot of religious right folks, what is Trump doing? What they want, what the religious right wants, is that broad freedom to discriminate kind of stuff, like the executive order. That's the goods for them. That's what they want. They could care less about the Johnson Amendment. They've already got people voting Republican. They don't need to tell anybody to vote Republican.
We got conservative preachers, though, here in town that are definitely against the Johnson Amendment. I mean,
Yeah.
Blair is a prime example. I mean, he wrote.
Outstanding anti-Johnson.
Oh, is he really? That's interesting.
He was one of those, what do they call it? Pulpit Freedom Sunday?
Yes.
Oh my
Like,
God.
Hey, you know what? There's that law. Screw that law. We're gonna.
Yeah, they literally filmed themselves endorsing a candidate from the pulpit and send it to the IRS, just kind of going like, yeah.
Because they know the IRS won't do anything about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And again, you're kind of like going, there's no reason for Paul Blair to do it, because who in his church is going to be like, yeah, I might consider Hillary. As a total side note, this was an interesting alliance. I was like, I wanted to do something I couldn't. Paul Blair was doing all this vaccine denial stuff. He brought in some speakers about the scourge of autism. And of course, I'm actually involved with an adult autistic group going, folks don't want to be seen as a scourge, right? And the idea that you're getting a weird form of science denialism. I mean, you're used to the creationism, right? Of course, the Earth could be 6,000 years old, but you're really going to deny vaccines to your kids?
It was an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, I had no
Give him
idea.
credit for doing some left-wing anti-science.
Exactly, spreading the thing.
Diversity.
Because he had like Oklahomans for Health Choice or something come and give a presentation, and they watched a documentary by the guy who was the scientist in England who got canned because of his dishonest research. Wakefield, yeah.
Yes, Wakefield in his Lancet article.
Yeah. So I'm not saying we didn't organize anything, but that was kind of a curious one where I was like, I bet you, because there are churches, again, who have folks who have autism and who are invested in that issue. And I don't know. I'm not saying that there's anything you can do with it politically, but in my mind, I'm going, you cross a line somehow, like Paul Blair did, and you're like, if that ever spilled out legislatively, it'd be easy to get churches on the other side to come out, because they've all got kids on the,
I mean, there is a legislator here in Oklahoma that for the last 2 years has put up legislation that basically would take away the religious and in other words, the only objection you could have to getting your kid vaccinated to send into public schools would be a medical one, which is
Yes.
Irwin Yen?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it probably will fail again, because last year when that was all going on, we showed up, there was a few of us that said we're really encouraging, hey, great idea, this is great legislation, we're really happy that you put this up. The next day, 100 people showed up and said, no, you can't give my kid autism with your vaccines.
I really feel like we need to be playing offense on these issues. Like maybe not every issue, but like on stuff like that, we can take the game to them. We can make them feel like they've done their bit and organized just by fighting back Irwin Yen's bills. Like I think on some issues we need to definitely take the offense for science and reason.
Yeah.
Instead of just constantly playing defense and be like, you can't teach creationism to my kids. Please stop.
Or once a year having a science march and feeling good about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm all for feeling good about your march. I haven't decided what hat we're going to have for the science.
Well, there is that they started, that's kind of like Oklahoma Coalition for Reproductive Justice. Started off was we needed to have some sort of voice for a pro-choice expression in the legislature. And the pink wave was when all these women they had a personhood amendment that would have basically outlawed in vitro fertilization, right? And they had all these women wear pink, and they took over the state capitol. And that's been kind of the strategy on a lot of the anti-abortion stuff and anti-birth control. But this last 2 years, they've created this thing called Pink Love. And they take these bills that have no shot, but they're good bills. like paid family medical leave, right? Comprehensive sexual education. There's always at least one representative who will be a champion. I mean, that's, and that's a great thing to have.
It moves the window of possibility. It moves like
Yes.
what people consider to be part of the realm of ideas that they talk about. And so over time, you can get there.
Exactly. We had like raising the minimum wage in Oklahoma. There's a bill. There's a, and a few of the more ones that there's a couple that may make it through. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to have a few legislators who you just know would be the champion. And that would be both, I guess, a goal for Americans United, but thinking about other kind of folks concerned about the First Amendment. We've had, I think we had someone like a Connie Johnson who you just rely on, and she would come and bring out the bill for you and all that. And we don't quite have anybody quite like that at this point. It'd be really nice if we did, just be able to bring out that kind of model legislation.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Colin Walkie, that'd be about the closest we have right now.
Yeah, and who's the other guy? Who's the sociology professor? I can't think of his name. Yeah, no.
We actually have a couple decent ones, but the one that always pops in my mind is Colin, just because it's Lori's husband.
Yes. And that's so nurturing that kind of relationship. I like that you can get national news. What is it when Connie Johnson produced a bill that would require men to, it would limit access to Viagra, I think, or something like that. Or something about spilling your seed and not being able to do that for men, and it got on this.
Definitely have a registry.
And she got on Stephen Colbert. It was great. It was the Colbert Report had to do this one. Yeah. I mean, any other questions with this? The only plug I'll make for Americans United is in some ways it's a whole new group. Not a whole new group. I don't know if that's not the right word. But it feels like it's reorganizing is the point. There was a period where it was lull. We literally contacted the national office and they didn't know we existed. Mm-hmm. We thought the Oklahoma City group closed, but the Tulsa group exists. No, the Tulsa group closed, and we have an Oklahoma City group. And we're actually meeting and doing things. Oh, really? Yeah, that's great. Can we get so they're starting to develop a relationship and get some support, financial or just even names and membership. And so there really is this kind of feel of rebuilding. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think I literally got involved because I went to the Peace and Justice thing they have in the fall at the Civic Center. Have you, anybody?
Yeah, there was the anti-Trump rally outside this year.
Yes, that's the one. And I literally just walked by Americans United, and they found out I was a pastor, and they're like, "You want to be on our board?" It's okay, I will do that.
We had a shortage.
So I will do this. So I mean, in other words, lots of ways to get involved is all I'm saying. Lots of possibilities, and it's exciting, and going to be very needed in Oklahoma as always. And to be honest, it's fun work, anyways. I imagine you already have that experience in the work you've already done. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but being outnumbered in such a big way, it sucks because you lose all the time politically. But it's you build a really tight-knit community of folks, and you'll know each other. And I just ended up growing with admiration of the community. I always think red state Democrats can teach the nation. We already know what it's like to be in opposition, so we got this.
There's a couple of things I might add at the very last of this about the importance of activism, especially right now in the political climate that we're in. Because I think that the from the White House on down, it has emboldened those that are on that side of the board to really press some of the legislators that help represent them to really push out some bad legislation. And I think we need to all get involved in this group to vote, make our vote count, and be politically active, because it's obviously we're not, I mean, they're going to push an agenda, and we need to stand up and say, hey, now, we're here too.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I was in Wyoming, I felt like I went to the Democratic Party meeting. And they're like, we're going to wear Obama T-shirts at the Sheridan Rodeo. And the Sheridan, it's a pretty conservative thing, the Sheridan Rodeo. Rodeos can have that kind of atmosphere. But a lot of it was like coming out of the closet, But it was actually really empowering in a way. Like, oh, my neighbors, It's kind of like there's a kind of the coming out campaign for atheists, or I don't know what the word is, but I've seen, the billboards. Like, it's just, oh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So that is empowering. And also because whether you win or lose, people will notice if you're there. So if the atheist group is here, the UUs are there, people will take note. Oh, you were at Pride. You were at that rally. You were writing that letter. And you might build a relationship or connect to. The folks that get paid attention to are the ones who show up. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's, we need to show up at the midterm elections are a huge thing. That's usually an election. I saw some statistics for how many people actually show up for the midterms. Mm-hmm. It's not a presidential election, and it's like, yeah, it's so few people actually get out and vote. We really could sway things by showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think we definitely need to. The other thing is, if you really want your voice to count when you contact legislators, and I was just at a town hall meeting for one of the state legislators, and that got somewhat interesting. But anyway, if you want them to listen to your voice, go vote every election. Well, no matter if it's for the city dog catcher, you show up and you vote, because if you go and talk to your state legislator or your national legislator and you ask them, hey, I have this issue, I want you to represent me, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at your voting record. They can't see how you voted, but they can tell every time you voted. And if it shows that you show up every time the polls open, guess what? They know that the next time their job comes up on the line, you're going to show up. And if you're mad about the way they've been doing business and they haven't been listening to you, you're probably going to vote against them. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's one way that, as being a citizens activist, if you're going to make those phone calls, and I encourage everybody to, make sure you're also voting, because that definitely changes the way they listen to you.
Yeah, that's
There's a point about Americans United with respect to voting, is that the one thing we don't do is election year, and we can't support.
Yeah, I don't want to. Sorry, I shouldn't have. Yes. Yeah.
We can talk to people who are elected.
Yeah.
We can go talk to our representatives and say, hey, we really don't like State Question 790. We think Oklahoma's Constitution should stay just the way it was in the Bill of Rights part for like ever. Stop changing it. Don't change it. We can go do issue advocacy. We can't try to take down, say, the electoral chances of, who was that pastor we were talking about?
Paul Blair. Yeah.
But I would help campaign against Paul Blair, but I would never do that with my AU hat on.
Yeah, I have to admit, I kind of had an AU, concerned liberal and AU at the same time, and that didn't always quite match, except to say that, yeah. Because they don't technically endorse candidates. And the only other thing to that also is, like the guy who proposed a bill on the state senator from Oklahoma City, the doctor who's been doing the autism, who's been doing the get your vaccines. Yeah. He's a Republican. So there are Republicans, and there's a few of them in the legislature, that are allies on various things, including LGBT, including separation of church and state. And one of the things that blew me away, is that 790 lost. I'm so like, how did that happen, right? So there's something going on in Oklahoma, especially if it's not identified with the party. If it's identified with the party, it's like, I have to vote Republican. I'm an Oklahoman. That's what you just do, But like, if you just issue-wise, this is the state that voted against 790 and voted for, I'm going to get the names wrong, 780 and 781. Like, how did that happen? There's a lot of folks you could talk to. And this was after they had all those TV ads with, was it David Lamb? Don't you want to be able to pray at football games?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know.
Still lost. So there's a lot of persuadable folks out there, you know, on the issues, if you can talk about issues.
I was certainly busy campaigning with just having conversations with those people about 790 who hadn't maybe thought about it that much. And I was always liking to point out that, hey, because I realized that the 790 was not about the Ten Commandments monument. It was about school vouchers.
Yeah.
I mean, they couched it in the Ten Commandments and prayer and public things. But what it really was about was the school vouchers. And the way I got a lot of my Christian friends to kind of think about that a little bit was like, I always come up with I live in the Moore schools and I pay a pretty good chunk of money to the Moore schools. But the last time I saw a voucher bill, they were talking about you could take $5,000 and your kid to a public school. Well, I don't pay $5,000 in, so I doubt very many of those parents were paying $5,000 in on their own. So they were taking not only their tax dollars out, they were taking yours. And I'm like, okay, suppose there's a Muslim cleric that builds a Muslim school in Oklahoma. How would you feel about them taking your tax dollars to a Muslim school? And it was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And it was, I think I waked some people up. But
Well, I think the school thing, again, I mean, I was just really impressed how they put together this group of Oklahoma pastors for public schools. And I do think, despite the voting patterns in Oklahoma, I think this voucher thing really did help sink 790. The idea that public schools would lose money. I think this is like a really salient issue. But it's just a hunch.
There was a school pay raise for teachers that didn't pass.
That didn't pass.
Which was interesting.
That was a funding issue, though.
Yeah.
That they didn't want teachers to have a raise. I figured the evangelicals voted against 790 because they didn't want their money to go to Catholic schools.
Well, that could be.
That's like very begins.
Yeah.
A couple things. The new version of 790, much smaller one,
Yeah.
is Senate Joint Resolution 15. SJR 15. It's in the Rules Committee right now, and it basically just carves out like a special exception for the monument.
Oh.
Like so instead of like repealing that part of the Bill of Rights, it adds in several paragraphs saying nothing in this section shall preclude the blah 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 Ten Commandments monument blah 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 blah.
So it doesn't say monuments like we could put in a Hindu monument. It's just Ten Commandments?
We'll still fight at the Satanic Temple and still try to get back from it.
Exactly.
I still want to.
It's just for the Ten Commandments.
Just for the Ten Commandments. Oh, one other thing is that I tend to be kind of camera happy. So I didn't know if there's a way I could get a picture with you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. I didn't want to stop talking. We can still talk, but before anybody leaves, I was just like, I gotta get a picture.
If you guys want to follow American Student on Facebook, it's facebook.com/AUOKC.
AUOKC.
Can you remember that?
There's also the Secular
Facebook.
Coalition for America. I don't know how many of you are signed up for that, but they do something called Action Alerts, and you get it in your email. And it's just a couple of clicks, and that there's legislation that's coming up that's somewhat problematic for people that are atheists or non-believers or separation of church and state issues. That's another great place where you can, hey, I can get politically involved. I can send an email to my congressman or senator saying, hey, no, keep the Johnson Amendment.
So the first group. Okay.
No, like nihilists.
That's not what I said.
Every time I hear that, it's like, don't worry, Donnie, they don't believe in anything. You know?
Don't worry, Donnie, there's men of power.
So is it the AUOKC?
Facebook.com/AUOKC.
Facebook.
We're trying to keep up with the bills as they move this year.
And what's the other group, one you mentioned?
The Secular Coalition for America.
Secular Coalition.
Sign up for their Action Alerts.
So is that federal legislation? They have the action alerts?
Actually, they actually even have some for if there's bad, egregious stuff here in Oklahoma. They will.
There always is.
Oklahoma's known for egregious stuff on that.
Does anyone need help
contacting their legislators? Or does
Yeah,
everybody
you were
here call
saying
them on a
something.
regular basis?
There's an app. for
I'm sure
that.
there's something in between those two.
So there's a fantastic app called 5 Calls that gives you the script of what to say. You just pick whatever issue you want to talk about. Has the number, you just tap it, calls your legislators for you, you read the script, you tell them your address so that they can verify you're a constituent, and hang up the phone. It's super easy, and you can call every single day, pick a different issue every day, and register your complaints and what you want them to do.
Is it iOS only?
I don't know if it's iOS only. It's called 5 Calls.
5 calls?
I get it on my iPhone. Yeah, 5 calls. The number 5 calls.
Oh, number 5.
Putting sugar in their gas tank was.
Oh, I will say, as a proposal, just to throw it out your way, since I said we should all do stuff together, I'll put my first foot forward and say that our church has on Sunday morning a conversation Sunday, not worship service, just a potluck meal and discussion. So we brought in Mark Davies. That's another guy. He teaches at OCU. We brought in various speakers. But the point is, if you could imagine a scenario where, like, if you wanted to join us for potluck and discussion about whatever the topic we should talk about, or if we wanted to bring in a speaker, I would propose that as something for your consideration. It's we have an open spring and summer right now. I mean, our next conversation Sunday is next week, and that's already filled. But it's always the first Sunday of the month.
I think you had us all at potluck.
Potluck, it's great. I'm just throwing it out there.
Is this the one in Norman?
Yeah, that's the one in Norman. It's an old, it's the United Ministry Center building, or the old one, right by the dorms.
Next weekend is your thing with Lori at OU, right?
No, that is end of March, April 1st and March 31st, I think so. So Lori Walkie, we have two things. One is she's doing a talk at the Sam Noble, and partly it's her activism or how we can kind of respond to Trump, and partly she's addressing it as a 30-year-old pastor, in a liberal church. Then she has a workshop the next day from 9 to noon at our church, and that we're asking for a little money for that, just because there's to help pay for both talks essentially, and that's a workshop. But you spend more time with her, and it's a smaller group of folks. So we try to bring that. So anyways, I throw that as something, and my hunch is any of these groups you could probably do that with too. And if we planned it big enough, further enough, we could actually try to get a couple groups. Like let's get West Wind, UU, Hillel, a couple, or the Quakers. Say, we're going to have this big thing together. Let's eat some food. We'll hang out.
Chocolate.
Chocolate's good.